right now in Washington, we've got lobbyists descending on Capitol Hill like locusts, pushing back as hard as they can on regulatory reform and the protections that are necessary at Wall Street. And we've got to make sure that people know that this is about Main Street. This vote is about Main Street, not about Wall Street.
How are you trying to justify this? Their attempts to maintain the status quo.
I think it's very difficult for them to do that, particularly given the pain that people are facing, particularly here in Michigan. But this is not just about Michigan; it's the whole country. The economy was in a tailspin, in a meltdown because of unbridled greed. There needs to be protections for taxpayers. There needs to be protections for investors, and we need those now. We can never let this happen again, and that's why meaningful protections and a common sense way of overseeing Wall Street is necessary. And the legislation that passed the House, I believe, does that. I was very involved in that as a member of the House Financial Services Committee, which passed in December. It's now before the Senate, and we've got to get it moving. And I'm certainly hoping that tonight that the Senate moves to allow this bill to get to the floor and let the debate begin. Because I think the facts are very clear that these types of common sense protections are necessary for the American people.
Gary, what sorts of things? What does reform need to look like?
Reform is a variety of things that are happening. One, it's going to be some very strong consumer protections when it comes to consumer protections to make sure that people can really afford the mortgages that they have, the credit cards. There aren't any hidden fees and traps and interest rates. It also means that institutions, hopefully we can rein in the kind of unbridled greed and the amount of speculation that is occurring in Wall Street firms right now. Wall Street in the past has been about where money comes into Wall Street and then gets invested into businesses on Main Street and other places. But recently we've seen Wall Street turn into a big casino. And in fact, we've had bets on other bets, which put the economy in a very precarious situation. And then when the House of Cards fell, it fell really hard. There was a huge thud, and that thud was most widely heard right here on Main Street. And that's why this reform bill is so important. This is about Main Street. It's about reforming Wall Street, but ultimately it's about protecting people here on Main Street.
Do you think that the Wall Street bankers should be
Certainly, if there is fraud, we've got to be very aggressive in that. As you know, there are certainly actions being taken. If there are actions of fraud, that is against the law, and people need to be brought to justice if that is indeed the case. So hopefully, we'll continue to see more investigations. But let me want to hear a little bit from our folks that are here too. Karen, do you want to step in here? Let me just have Karen step in. Karen is a business owner here who has been an example of someone who has been impacted as a result of what's happened on Main Street. Karen?
Hi. Yes, I have a business in Birmingham, Michigan, and I represent magazines and websites for national media companies. And obviously the economy in Michigan has affected my business, but the double whammy was when I usually function on a line of credit, and that dried up about a year and a half ago, and I have not been able to deal with that, so I haven't been able to maintain payroll. So the result has been that I've had to let go of a few employees. I'm quite a small business. I went from 6 to 3 employees because of that. So it's affected me personally, as it has many people, and it's affected my business along with people who are in the same business that I'm in the area, because it's a small community, so we talk and we're all suffering.
And your name, I'm sorry?
Karen Teegarden.
Again, how do you spell Teegarden?
Teegarden.
Then we have Kirk Glover here. Excuse me, Karen here. Kirk is a senior citizen, retiree, not a senior citizen, a retiree, who has also been impacted, and his story is typical of so many people. Kirk?
Yeah, I thought I did everything right. You know, I worked, I saved, invested, did everything I was told to do to make it. And I thought, boy, this is nice. I retired. I think everything's going fine. And then all of this crap happens. And I call it crap because that's what it is. I wish I had more protection at that time from our legislators than we do right now. But anyway, what has happened in my life is I was always like to give gifts to my kids, especially at graduation and surprising them. Hey, that's all gone. I like to give to charities. You know, I give them whatever time I can now, but the money is just not there anymore. And my biggest fear, and I never thought, this is a nightmare for me, is that I have the potential of becoming a nightmare to my kids by becoming a financial burden to them, which I could never have dreamed in all my years of work. So.
Sorry, sir, could you say your name again?
Lobring, L-O-B as in boy, R-I-N-G, Kirk.
Or Kirk?
Kirk, K-I-R-K.
But how might you be a burden to them? What happened?
What happened was I lost almost half my investments, and now I'm down to a level where I don't know what's going to happen. I'm okay right now, but looking down to the future, you know, another one of these things is, and you know, I don't want to go back to work because I feel strongly that retirees are taking jobs away from our young people that need jobs. So, I mean, I'm worried. I can become a burden to them because they're going to have to take up the financial slack that I thought I had covered. It's not covered now.
Congressman, how hopeful are you that legislation will make it out of the Senate, fairly similar looking legislation to what you guys passed out of the House?
Well, I am hopeful, and I'm hopeful that that'll happen because stories like we're hearing here on Main Street in Royal Oak need to be told over and over again to the members of the Senate that this bill is more than Wall Street. This is about lives on Main Street, not only individuals who are retirees, as we've heard, but also small businesses that have to create jobs. So we do have to get some support to move forward, but once that support is there, I think people will understand that the status quo is not acceptable, and we can never have the kind of financial meltdown that we just experienced. We can never have that again. We've got to make sure that we are protecting investors, protecting families, and protecting small businesses, and getting away from the casino mentality of Wall Street to return Wall Street to its roots, which is a place in which we can raise capital to invest in businesses and in productive activities here in America.
Congressman, part of the reform, do you want the derivatives business to be taken out of Wall Street?
The derivatives have to be reformed. Basically what we had with derivatives and credit default swaps was a market that extended into the trillions of dollars in a completely unsupervised way. And that needs to be much more transparent. There are some very key reforms in the Wall Street legislation. What it'll do is require derivatives to be traded on an exchange. It's going to be required also that there's actually money backing those up. We all recall what happened with AIG, where we had an insurance company issuing derivatives that acted like insurance, but had nothing actually backing it up. And so as the house of cards fell, it was just accelerated. We've got to make sure there's actually money backing it up. There has to be transparency, and we can't have any of these off-balance sheets transactions that put so much money into the darkness. And so when the economy started to unwind, no one knew what anybody had, and that just froze the capital markets. So there are some significant changes in this legislation for derivatives, credit default swaps, making sure they're traded on the exchanges and there's actually money backing them up. And that transparency is going to go a large measure to protecting investors, protecting families.
Are all those things non-negotiable for you? I mean, do you think financial reform would be worth it if it doesn't have what you just mentioned?
Derivatives, it will not make sense. Financial reform has to get very tough on exotic financial instruments, particularly those exotic financial instruments that, in my mind, add nothing to the productivity of America. They add nothing to our ability to be competitive and help our manufacturers that we can actually build something. Instead, a lot of these derivatives are basically casino-type instruments that allow people to take bets, oftentimes bets against the economy. We're certainly hearing some allegations of Wall Street firms that took huge bets against the economy while at the same time selling their clients' products. That cannot occur again. We've got to, again, return Wall Street to what it can do, which is raise money for businesses, and not have financial instruments that are basically bets on bets and then bets again.
Congressman, on a different subject that was talking about reform, there was a report that came out last week, talked about that on the healthcare reform side, that the measure is going to cover more people, but it's not going to reduce the deficit. Just your thoughts, your reaction to that.
You're referring to healthcare?
Last week, yes, sir.
Yeah, the healthcare, the deficit's very clear is that the deficit will be reduced with the healthcare bill. That the Congressional Budget Office had about $130 billion the first 10 years, and then it goes up to the $1 trillion in the second 10 years. Healthcare reform is critical to slowing down the increase of healthcare costs, and it's very clear that the reforms will do that over time.
In 2008, they were selling naked short calls. Now, I found out that's illegal. Are they doing anything about that? And
Yes.
Where was the Securities Exchange on that? You know, I saw right through that right away. Why didn't the Securities Exchange see that?
Yes, and that's why you got to have even more transparency to make sure that we're making sure that kind of activity,
Are they going to do anything to those people?
In derivatives, there was nothing. Where the biggest part of it was in derivatives, which, as you know, nothing was reported at all on derivatives, which is why we